and we're lucky to have you here today. So thank you for joining us. We're going to start of the session with our formal interview. So for our first question, could you tell those that are listening a little bit about your career journey and what it is that you do now?
So I am a wildlife cinematographer and filmmaker, and I work on shows for Netflix, Nat Geo, and the BBC, like Dynasties, The Hunt, Our Planet, Wild Isles, which started last night on BBC, although I didn't film any of that. My bit's to come. And as a kid, I guess where I came from was a absolute passion for being outdoors, watching light, being in nature. I wasn't one of those kids who like dissected worms. I was much more of a sort of sit in nature type of a person, or be dragged up mountains by my brothers. Although many of my pals were the type that sort of would love to do that. But that's where it starts. It starts with a real passion for nature. And I left school, I was raised in Ireland, so I did something called my leaving certificate, and I left school thinking about going to art college, but not really sure, and ended up sort of actually doing nothing, swimming about a little, not with a huge amount of academic achievements, because I realised that actually I was more of an apprentice. I learned better from others rather than academically, and that's the way it's always been. And I headed off to Tanzania, where I met, as part of 2 years just hanging out in Tanzania doing almost nothing, I met a wildlife film crew, and it was like, yes, oh my word. I'd never seen anyone who looked like me that did that job, but I realised that that was the light bulb moment. I want to do it. But how do you get into it? It's really, really hard. I spent 3 years writing to everybody, searching around, and finally I got in touch with a guy called Hugo van Lauwijk, who was a 8 Emmy award-winning wildlife filmmaker who'd been married to a lady called Jane Goodall. And Jane Goodall is a primatologist, or one of the primatologists of our time, absolutely incredible woman. And she, Hugo, filmed all her pivotal work for Nat Geo, and he was now living in the Serengeti, and I got to apprentice to him for 7 years, which was extraordinary. And as to what I do, I am a long lens camera woman, which means I like to capture behavior. I like to be far away. I have huge respect for nature. I don't like to be in its face, and I think that nature doesn't like us in its face. So I like to be in a car, or in a hide, or up a tree, or far away, and that enables me to capture whatever it might be, a cheetah hunting, a gibbon brachiating, I've been doing that for 30 years, which is ridiculous. I can do a few other things through too. I do high speed. There was a show called The Hunt, which opened with a very dramatic shot of a gazelle being chased by a cheetah, and I shot that on something called a Phantom 4K Flex, and that allowed us to see every moment of and twist and turn of that gazelle getting away successfully from the cheetah. That was a great moment. It was my first sort of Attenborough moment, where I heard his voice over my footage and was like, yes, that's it. I've arrived now. But I love the tech. I'm not scared by it, but I often go into shoots not knowing anything about the tech, or having had very limited experience. So you don't need to be a mad techie. You don't need to be a zoologist. You just need to be, as I say, completely passionate about nature. And I thought before we went on, it might be useful to show you actually what I did. And so what I've done is, there's a clip here which myself and another cameraman, John Aitchison, shot for Dynasty's Lions. And I was online the other day. In fact, we just found out 94 million people have watched this clip, which is brilliant, because that's what I do, why I do what I do, which is to reach people and to make them feel about nature. So the fact that this has been watched by so many people is great. And Jazz, would you mind playing the clip for us?
As they mature, young males begin to explore the boundaries of the pride's territory. Red has ventured out alone. and blundered straight into the middle of the hyena clan. He's trapped by over 20 of them. The pack tries to wear him down. This number of hyenas could kill him. It's impossible to fight them all at once. He can't keep them at bay for much longer. He's powering fast. His ally, Tartu, has heard the commotion. Now the odds have changed. Even for 20 hyenas, a pair of male lions is too much to take on. Red is lucky.
Oh, you're muted, Sophie.
I hope it played back better than I was seeing it. That looked dreadful for me, but hopefully it looked all right for you, and you could see the emotion of those lions and the fear that poor old Red was going through.
It definitely did. I was so relieved when there was a second line that came in. So great, and what a nice visual aid to think about kind of what you do, and it kind of seems crazy and just kind of unbelievable, really, that's what you get to do. Yeah, and
you could make a living from doing what I do, right? I mean, you get to see the best bits, and that's why it was important to show the first bit, to show that it's not all glamour and lions. It's also, there's a lot of graft that goes into it.
I imagine. I mean, to start with, for our kind of second question before we dive into all the different areas, could you tell us about The Hunt, which is the programme that led to you winning a BAFTA in 2016? What was that experience like, both from the filming aspect and then to getting that award for your work?
The Hunt was amazing. I worked, and when it was a team of us who got the BAFTA, very much so. There was a core team of us, and with wildlife filmmaking, you very rarely get to film the whole thing because they take such a long time and so much effort. You'll often go away for a month. So for The Hunt, I did various sequences. The cheetah sequence I talked about earlier, myself and Jamie McPherson spent a month in Kenya filming He was on a gimbal, which is a 6-axis gimbal that you can drive along with a long lens. I was on high speed. That was on screen, I think, for what, around 5-6 minutes. So 30 days of work with a team of you out there. So the experience is very intense, and it was an amazing honor, obviously, for us to get the BAFTA. It was a great moment, but it was also, you know, as I said, I'm very lucky to get to do what I do with the most brilliant people and good filmmaking. Something like The Hunt took, when you see a show like that, or you see a show like Wild Isles, I filmed my sequence for Wild Isles 2 years ago. It takes such a long time and such a committed team of people, from researchers at the very beginning and obviously the people who have the ideas. Once you've got your research down, you then put into place the shoots, and there's a lot of scheduling and logistics, and your production team are hugely vital. There's loads of different cogs in the machine, and then you go out onto location with your producers, and then you film, and that might be anything from 3 days to 4 to 5 weeks. And then you come back, and then the whole editing process begins. So there's a huge amount of roles within wildlife filmmaking. It's not just the camera. We get to do the sort of glamorous hard end bit where you see, but actually there's many cogs, as I say, to that machine.
It's really crazy to think that you film something and then it takes so long to put that together. And if you're filming for a month and you only get 6 minutes worth of footage, how, just as an additional question, how much footage do you think you might film? Like, how many hours worth of footage to make a clip of that, like, sort of length?
It just depends on your shooting ratio and the luck that you have, and you might have really good luck and you get all the behavior in one day, and your shooting ratio can be very low, so the amount that you shoot to the, you know, as opposed to the amount you put in, or you can have a really horrendous shoot where you come back with 0, having shot every day. So there is no set, but hours, put it this way, hours, terabytes and terabytes and terabytes.
I would not want to be the person who has to comb through that, that's for sure.
It's true, it's true.
So obviously we can see from both those different clips that you can travel the world with your job, and you can go to so many places that many people might not even ever get to go to. What has been your kind of favourite place and favourite animal to film?
Oh gosh, well, I'm very lucky. I think that it's really interesting because times are changing, and rightly so. Right now, things are changing so quickly that traveling now, what we're desperately trying to do is get teams in place in country, Indigenous talent filming their wildlife. But it's at the minute there's a lot of passing on of skills, so we still get to travel a lot, which is great. My favorite place it's impossible. That's an impossible question, Charlie, but I will say that there have been many incredible, memorable encounters, from finding myself on a beach on the Katmai Peninsula, and when I say beach, it's sort of pebbly. It's sort of, think more Bognor than Caribbean, and it goes on for miles. And I was filming bears. There's a time at the beginning of the summer where the bears come down, and they all meet, and then they fish for salmon. So we were waiting for bears fishing salmon, and out of nowhere a wild wolf appeared, and the wild wolf had no fear. It was completely and utterly fearless, and it walked to within a meter of me. I was crouched down. Its eyes were on a level with mine, and it gave me the most. I just looked into the eyes of a wolf, and I don't think many people get a chance to do that, and it was an extraordinary moment. And then I filmed it fishing salmon, which was even more brilliant, and that actually ended up going in The Hunt, as well as Our Planet, actually, for another one. But so I love being somewhere where I'm pushed and challenged. I love going to the Antarctic. That is an amazing thing to do. Last year I went, I did a 1,500 nautical miles on a 20-meter yacht from the Falklands down to the Antarctic Peninsula to film penguins, across something called the Drake's Passage. That was not the fun bit. I don't like being in a boat, and certainly a 20-meter boat in very 8-meter high waves for 11 days to get to the Antarctic was it pushed me, but I like pushing myself. So and then you get to the Antarctic and your eyes can't quite believe how beautiful and the sights we get to see. So favorite place to film, usually the place I'm currently filming, to be honest, but I can tell you the place I hate filming most, and I now really try not to, and I use a feeble excuse. I say I'm too tall for jungles because I'm 1.83 meters, and when you put a 1.83 meters person in a rucksack and you go through jungles, you get a lot of spiders, as Theo was saying. You get to eat a lot of spiders. So I'm not a huge fan of hot jungles and biting insects, and I feel like I've done my time. I've spent a lot of time working in trees where you sit on a metre by a metre squared platform waiting for something to come along, being bitten by everything, and I feel like, okay, I'm done on that. So plenty of favourite places and a couple of not so favourite places too.
I'm definitely glad you mentioned that, because my next question was going to be, what's the worst place and worst animal that you filmed?
Yes, I mean, I think I'll go back. The worst is that definitely 98 different types of mosquitoes who really enjoyed the fact that we can't use DEET near cameras because there's a lot of plastic and the DEET isn't good for plastic, which means that I'd come down from the platform in the morning and my face, I'd look like some sort of alien because it would be swollen from the bites. So that's the glamorous bit you don't get to see. And even now I'm filming lions at the minute. I will spend a month going out each and every day, 16 hours a day, and I can't exercise. You can't walk. You get out of the car, you scare the lions. By the time you get into the evening, you're completely banjaxed. You don't want to do anything. 3 minutes of skipping and you're done. And so I come back home from those kind of shoots absolutely exhausted from the lack of exercise. So you're either at one end or the other,
Really, really interesting. And as someone allergic to mosquitoes, that sounds like absolute hell to me, to have to go on a jungle platform and be surrounded by them with no sort of protection. You could not pay me enough to do that.
Yeah. It's worth it for what you get to see. You get to see the most amazing things. In that case, owl monkeys, which was just stunning.
So obviously lots of adventure, lots of really crazy experience where you get to kind of push yourself and dangerous things, full of traveling, and I'm sure you have great fun while working with your team. Could you tell us about some of those realities that we might have seen in the first clip that people might not think of when they think of becoming a cinematographer?
Yeah, sure. I think that being a cinematographer or involved in wildlife filmmaking in any way means that if you're on location, you're away from your family and your friends. And that would be my number one, definitely. Sort of, you've got to be really passionate about this in order to miss so many things at home. I've got a 22-year-old now, but I missed a lot of his birthdays, and he's brilliant. He supports it entirely, but didn't get a choice. No, he did. But I'm, missing out on family and friends. I don't think there's been any major events that I haven't been away for, from last year sitting, hearing about the Queen dying whilst being in the middle of nowhere. There's so many cultural moments you miss out on, and I don't think people think about this. It's hard graft. You're away from your family and friends, but it's brilliant. It's the best job in the world, although increasingly hard due to the climate crisis, if I'm honest. But there you go.
Oh, that's interesting. That the kind of climate crisis is affecting your job. Does that have a really big, sorry, and again, additional question, just is that does that have quite a big impact on how you work, and has that changed things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, we get into this because we're passionate about nature and we love nature. And over the 30 years that I've been filming, I've seen nature change, and we have this extraordinary experience about being able to go onto location and talk to the people. So a lot of what we do revolves around people who are on the ground, who are living there. researchers or people who protect the wildlife, and the local knowledge that we tap into when we go away on these shoots. And every single time you speak to them, and more increasingly, and it's accelerating, they're saying that the change that they're seeing due to climate. So you go to film something and it's not happening anymore, or it's happening at a different time of year. So absolutely, it's very much happening in front of our eyes, but also especially when you get the opportunity to learn from, you know, the local knowledge that we're lucky enough to be exposed to, and they just say it's, you know, we've seen this coming for ages. So yeah, it really is affecting everything. And as I say, we have to find a new way of working in wildlife, where we are transferring our skills, because the UK has a brilliant skill set. You know, we've got an amazing amount of very talented wildlife filmmakers, but we need to share that knowledge and mentor and help you know, share our knowledge, and so that people can tell their own stories.
Really interesting to think about, and I know that might have been a little bit unexpected for you, so thank you for answering that one.
Yeah, no problem.
Our next question then is thinking about kind of what motivates and drives you when you are kind of both through your personal life and while you're working, because I imagine there must be some times when you feel like going, oh, you know, this is too much. You know, what kind of pushes you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm genuinely, I'd say it's the joy, the peace and the joy, and it sounds a bit right on, but it's absolutely the truth that when I'm out there and I'm looking down the lens and trying to engage with this animal, trying to transfer what it's, you know, to communicate what I'm seeing it doing, that's what drives me. I have an absolute, I lose myself in it. I'm passionate about it. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. When I didn't do it, when I had my son, I was unable to film for a few years, and I really missed it. It was like a part of me was missing. So hopefully the joy I feel at being in nature motivates me, but also hopefully helping to affect the change in behaviour, and helping, if we can show one person red and a load of hyenas and it makes them like, whoa, and think about wildlife in a different way and care and do something, then we're doing our job right. And so that really motivates me, that there's a real underlying cause to what we're doing. We want it to you know, we want nature to thrive, and also here's the thing, you don't have a career, you have a life, you know, and this is my life. It's not just my career, it's everything to me, without being cheesy.
No, I live our time working, so if it is your life, you spend the majority of time with those you work with. So yeah, you might feel like it's cheesy, but I guess it also is really important, that's what drives you. Our final question before we move on to our student Q&A is, what piece of advice would you give those that want to go into wildlife cinematography?
Well, I guess that we live in an extraordinary time, don't we, right now, where cameras are really affordable, or we've got them on our phones. So you can take your camera, you've got TikTok or YouTube. And so if you're interested in being a wildlife cinematographer, be a wildlife cinematographer, get out there, do it, you know, just there are no excuses. There is wild isles to show you. There is nature here. You don't need to go to Africa or India. You've got to be proactive, use your initiative, and yeah, just practice, get out there, do it, and be, you know, tenacious about it. If you want it, be tenacious, you know, really go for it.
Great. Awesome. What a great final question to finish our formal interview on. We're now moving on to the student Q&A, and I have lots of questions that have been submitted to us to ask you. So we'll try get through these as many as possible. And our first question comes from St Andrew's Catholic School, and of the many that they have asked, we're going to ask this one in particular, which is, how did you start off in the media industry? What was your kind of first couple of jobs? And they've also asked, Do you have a stable income? I think this may come from someone at St Andrew's Catholic School who's worried about financial stability with this career.
Well, I'm going to address that one first, because I never got in this to get an income. I got in it because I wanted to do it. And it goes back to the, you don't have a career, you've got a life moment. So for many years, I didn't know. I do now. It's taken 30 years to, to get to that point, but other people can do it quicker. As I say, I don't think you do this for the money. So if you're looking for a job with stable income, this is not the career for you. It has to start with a passion. And for the first few years I worked in it, I worked almost for free because I wanted to learn. And stable income, maybe, possibly, but don't do it for that, would be the answer to that. And the first jobs I ever did were for the Discovery Channel, actually. I worked in the Serengeti, helping on a couple of films, and then I got my own film about lions. I seem to do a lot of lions, Charlie, that's my thing. And it went out, and it was the first film I'd ever made as sort of the lead camera person. And we got nominated for cinematography for it. So that was a really good, healthy start. But I've worked on everything from things that you guys might have seen, Seven Worlds, to A Perfect Planet, to The Mating Game, because there's so many sequences, and as I say, it takes quite a lot of camera people to make these shows. There's a huge amount of collaboration and a lot of different effort. But thank you, St Andrews, good questions.
Wonderful. I'm sure we'll go back to them later. But our next question comes from Vision West, Nottinghamshire College. And they have asked, what are some of the challenges that you face in your day-to-day role?
I think that because, yeah, great question. The challenges, every day different. But I'd say that the challenges, I mean, first of all, find your cast, I would say. If there's a water hole and you know everyone's going to come to it, that's great. But say you're filming a bear, you know they're going to come to the river, but which stretch of the weather. So it's your day-to-day challenges are find your cast, but also how do you, it's one of those things that you can find yourself having to concentrate and look down a camera for 8 hours. The wildlife doesn't take a break. It's not going to go, right, time out, everyone, tea, coffee, you off. So it's the challenges are maintaining concentration and being really in the room, really present, and yet able to adapt. So you're always, when you're filming, you're looking down the camera and you're always thinking of the next thing whilst trying to do the thing you're doing perfectly. So being able to multitask and think ahead of what you're doing so you can tell your story. But, even simple things like if you saw there Mark McEwen trying to eat with a face mask on it, you wouldn't believe how many bugs we've all eaten, So it really depends on where you are, Vision West. It really depends on where you are, the challenges, but they are plenty. Sometimes it can also just be boredom. You could just be sat there and you can be in the short grass plains, there can be no birds to look at, there's always a sky and it's great, but there are moments of just like, wow, nothing's happened. But those are very rare, I have to say.
That's really, really interesting to hear about, particularly having to try and focus for such long periods of time. Was that a skill that you found that you developed? Because I'm sure all our kind of budding wildlife cinematographers don't have that sort of experience yet.
Oh, see, I bet that they do. I bet that if they're
so it kind of gets easier the more you do it.
Yeah, it is easier, but it's like, I bet that these people who are passionate about wildlife, who love it, you get into the minutiae, you get into the detail, whether it's a feather, even looking at a mallard, or you can just like the colours, and so it's about noting the tiny things and I guess so. It is maintaining concentration is really, really hard. But if you're, filming a kingfisher, you're getting used to where it's, oh, look, it's using that repeatedly. I can start thinking about how I'm going to tell this story because I'm using my field craft. So there's a lot of field craft involved and as I say, genuine interest. to sort of get you into that place where you can really concentrate. But I reckon if you're into nature already, you've already got it in buckets.
I'm really glad that you touched on that little fieldcraft, sorry, as being a skill, because we have a question from the Deferrers Academy that have asked about kind of training and like different skills or courses or things that they might need in addition to getting a kind of a degree that you might need if you want to be a wildlife photographer.
Yeah, or a cinematographer, exactly. So the training, I think it's like the people who I've met who succeeded are the ones who actually put in the time and the graft in nature. So that's your first skill. That is it. It's getting out there and observing. And you can't make someone sit out there unless they want to, because we sit out in the most dreadful weather, you know, whether it's -45 in the Antarctic, as you saw, or it's +40 in, you know, the Central African Republic, wherever it might be. You've got to. So the training one can do, I think, is just familiarizing yourself with your gear. So if you've got, you know, you've got hold of a camera and a lens, get out there and use it, and you know, go through all the settings. Don't have it on auto, put it on manual and work out, you know, what different things do and how you can make things look good to you, because it's your story that you're trying to tell. But fieldcraft is great, and that just takes time from being in the field, literally. And other skills you can have, you can also train yourself up with editing tools. There's free editing tools like DaVinci Resolve that you can download, and you can cut your own stuff. But there's iMovies as well. There's loads of stuff on your phone you can do. So you don't need to have the mega expensive gear that I'm lucky enough that I get to use. You can do it on the smaller stuff too, very well.
I'm glad you touched on that as well, because St Andrew's Catholic, who asked the first question, also asked, is it worth knowing things like Photoshop and Adobe Premiere? So you've almost answered that as well.
Absolutely. I think just skill set. We've got YouTube, we've got, you know, we've got such amazing resources. Before we used to have manuals, you know, it's a bit like we had phone books. I mean, who thought that was a good idea? But we had, you know, but now you can just go online and teach yourself exactly Photoshop. Absolutely, accrue all those skills because it won't do you any harm at all. It's a great thing to do.
Wonderful. So we have a question that's coming in from, and I have initials of the school here, not the full name. So they've gone NWSLC, and they have asked, do you have to relocate to get work? Is that something that if you want to be a wildlife cinematographer that you have to think about, is kind of relocating?
It's a really good question. It depends. It depends where you are. I live in London. Bristol is very much the hub of wildlife filmmaking in the UK. There's many production companies there. A lot of people find it does help to move to Bristol. But when you've got everybody in one place, unless you've got something to show for being in Bristol, if you, for instance, like Hamza, live in Scotland, you know, and he's made Scotland where he knows, that's what he knows about, that's his knowledge, he's very happily based up there and gets work from there. So I don't think you do need to relocate. I think what you do need to do is, you know, that local knowledge, if you're living in Dartmoor, if you're living in London, if you're living in Nottingham, there will be some nature around you that might be particular to that area, and you know, specialize in that, find out about that, and tell stories about that to start with before you consider relocating. Relocation is something you would do, I would say, further down the line.
Great, so we have time just for a couple more questions, and we have a bunch of questions that have come in from Beth's Grammar School, and I think this student is thinking about, you know, what they do once they've gotten their degree and how they find work. We have a few other people that have asked similar questions. So Redcart and Cleaver College have also asked about the best way to get work once you've started or finished, sorry, I should say, your degree? What's your next step there? And I know you said it took 3 years to find an apprenticeship, was it, if I remember?
They really don't exist anymore. But yes, that's again, that's a really good and a really hard question, because finding work is all about what you're prepared to put into it. You've done your degree at UE or Falmouth or National Film and Television School or Cumbria, wherever it might be, or you've come to it, you know, you've done a zoology degree, but you've decided you want to be a camera person. So maybe I would reach out to conservation organisations, people that you admire. They're always looking for publicity. They're always looking. So say if you're in London, for instance, you might go to Woodbury Wetlands, and you might go and just, you know, go around filming stuff and then say, look, I can make a little film for your social media channels. And that's a really good way in. Sort of find your local RSPB. They're never going to turn down a really lovely little film made by, short, concise, you know, story made by you. And that's often a way in, and that's how quite a few of my friends got into wildlife filmmaking. They did it through volunteering at the RSPB, and then they kind of, you know, then they took that forward until they end up with careers as camera people. But I think, you know, just borrow gear and get out there and make films. And the advantage is now that once you, again, because of the, you know, the whole social media thing, is you can make films and we can see them really easily. You know, it's not like you have to meet me or whatever. You can make a short show reel, no more than 3 minutes long, which that tell a story, most importantly, that tell a story, and then you can share them on social media, and you can reach out to camera people such as myself or any of the other people that you read on the credits, and some will say nothing because they'll be up a tree and wherever they might be, and some might be too busy, but maybe 1 or 2 people will come back to you and go, I'll look at your show reel. And then if they think you've got talent, they might help you, but also if they think that, you know, if they think that you've got great stories, they might go, hold on a second, when they're next in with the BBC or with Silverback or the production companies, familiarise yourself with all of them as well. Who makes these films? Who are the people you admire? And then you can just say, look, just 3 minutes of your time, please, could you just check out my film on YouTube? You know, it's really not hard now to get into the industry if you've got talent and passion.
I love that as a key takeaway, talent and passion. What a nice thing to kind of end the session on, as we are running out of time. So before we kind of close today's session down, is there any kind of thoughts, feelings, or final comments that you would like to leave our young people with as they leave today's session and reflect?
I guess that what I would love to do in my filmmaking is I'd love to give hope. Because I think there is hope, and I get people, you know, to get people to emotionally engage, that's a really good thing. So I think, you know, we've got to use our voices. I'm a great believer in that. So I would say speak out for what you believe in. Look at amazing role models like Megan McGovern or Lizzie Daly or Nina Constable or Liz Bonnen. You notice I'm saying women because that's part of what I love as well. But, you know, speak out, and there are a wealth of people out there doing it. See what they want you to speak up for, or find your own projects and, you know, sign a petition, follow it through collectively. Let's just speak up. Let's all speak up.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sophie. It's been wonderful to interview you and hear everything from both the really amazing adventurous aspects to some of those more kind of facing realities of what it's like to be a wildlife cinematographer. It's been so wonderful to hear from your own experiences. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it.